Thank you, Mr. President, my friends in the Senate. I would like to begin by recognizing the Senator from the 50th and appreciating the input that he has taken and the conversations that he and I have had and the tenor of this discussion. And I also appreciate very much the treatment that I have received as a new member of this body. And I realize that not everyone has had an opportunity to form an opinion about me yet. But I want to say that I have been impressed and heartened by the reception that I've received throughout this process, and for that I say thank you to all of the people who I've dealt with in here. I really do appreciate the collegiality and the friendships that I've made thus far. The Senator from the 50th mentioned that there were philosophical differences with regard to this bill. There may be, there are, but the two amendments that I speak to today are not about philosophical differences. They're just what I would consider to be technical changes. Now, the first one begins here. This amendment would grandfather in all of the current students for the Hope Scholarship and those who are going to graduate this spring. And the way that we would do that is this. This is the Georgia Student Finance Commission projected reserves for fiscal year 2011. In other words, this is how much money there's going to be in the bank in June. You'll see the year-end reserve balance for all reserves total $681 million. That is after we have completed the last round of the pre-HB 326 set of Hope Scholarships. HB 326 requires a 50% reserve. That reserve, the total reserves at the end of the fiscal year is $681 million. Now, the 2012 reserve required by HB 326 is 50% of those previous revenues. That's $441 million required by HB 326. That excess reserve amount means we have $239 million in the bank. Now, we have heard in committee and elsewhere and in repeated discussions with the governor's office that they believe that over the next several years, in order to get the folks that are in college out of college, to quote, grandfather them in. I guess it's funny that my first big amendment is about grandfathering people, but to grandfather them in, the governor estimates that it will cost $180 million. Now, we believe that number to be high. When we asked the Board of Regents, they sent us a number that said 58 million. And I don't know the difference between 58 million and 180 million, how to explain that. I just know that that makes 180 million sound high. So my belief is that based on simple subtraction, we will have an excess reserve amount at the end of this fiscal year of $239 million. We will be able to grandfather in all of the current students according to the governor's office for $180 million. Now, that means that will still preserve the 50% reserve. Now, that's not a philosophical question. That is simple subtraction and then addition, because I believe that we owe it to the current students who have come into college with the promise of hope, who have worked hard, who have maintained, who have upheld their end of the bargain, and now we're going to tell them, sorry, the state of Georgia is not good on its promise. Because why? I have looked at these numbers, and at least if you've drawn and made an opinion about me, you'll believe that I've looked at these numbers. I have, and we have had multiple people analyze this data. We can't figure out why we would possibly need to keep that $239 million in the bank when we already have the required reserve. So now I ask, this is a simple choice. It's not philosophical, it's not partisan, it's just a question of fairness. You have students that are in college who have maintained their 3.0 at every single Hope checkpoint. You have students that are about to graduate, and the question is, do we allow those students to finish out the trip, to finish out their college education or not. And there is no doubt that if we cut the Hope Scholarship by what we'll discuss later by 20% this fall or more, if we cut books and fees like we all agree we need to, then there will be some students who don't graduate from college because they can't afford it. And we can. And under this amendment, we would uphold our end of the bargain, we would maximize the number of college graduates, and we would not impact the state or the Hope Scholarship's financial solvency at all. Now, I'll say one last thing. The size of the reserve at 50% is incredibly generous already. Here's why. We used to have a reserve on the Hope Scholarship because if you had an increase in tuition or an increase in enrollment, it would increase the required payments. That's what we've seen. That's why we've been dipping into the reserves. But under HB 326, if we decouple the payment from the tuition then we'll balance the budget. That's the whole purpose of HB 326. If we balance it out every year, we're not going to need to dip into the reserve at all. HB 326, as we understand it, balances the budget every year. We haven't argued that. We think it does it in the wrong way, but it balances the budget. So there's no reason to have an excess reserve. I truly, in my heart, don't believe that is a philosophical difference between my party and any other party, between me and any other senator. So I beg of you, on behalf of the students in our colleges today who have worked hard, who have done their end of the bargain, that we ask the state of Georgia to uphold our end of the bargain and with no risk at all. I know people have been told by others how to vote, but I would hope that we can vote our conscience on this one. Thank you. And now I would like to speak to Amendment 6, Mr. President. Okay. Thank you. Again, I don't believe this is a philosophical difference. This is just a technical matter that I believe there's bipartisan concern about and bipartisan support for. This amendment reforms the way that the Lottery Corporation is required to pay money into the Lottery for Education account. Let me begin here. Our lottery pays about 26% of its revenues into the Lottery for Education account. That puts us at 29th among 42 state lotteries. The national average is closer to 30%, so we are below average. Now, we have heard, I know off the record and on the record, a huge amount about how great and wonderful our Lottery Corporation is. But right now, we have the success of our lottery is always touted in terms of revenues. What we do is we have lots and lots of revenues. We've heard over and over again what lottery revenues means. It means people are going in our communities all over this state and paying their money. Now, those revenues, there's no public benefit from maximizing lottery revenues. We've heard some call it gambling. It is. But there's no benefit publicly to maximizing the lottery revenues. The only thing that really matters, that provides the public benefit, is maximizing the amount that goes into the education fund. So what we have done thus far is maximize the revenues and minimize the amount that we've gone into education. The other important thing, in the 90s, our number was above 30. It has progressively gone down. Here is our super successful lottery. Every year, the revenues go up. This is adjusted for inflation. Every year, the lottery revenues have gone up. And every year, the amount that has been paid into the education account has been almost dead flat. That is the best demonstration that I have seen of what the Lottery Corporation is maximizing and what they are minimizing. And they have reduced the percentage almost every year in order to maintain that red line. And maybe they've done a good job of taking that blue line, the gambling line, up as high as they can go. But the line that we care about, the line that I care about, and the line I know in my heart you guys care about, is that bottom line. How much are we putting into the educational account for our students? That's the public benefit. That's the promise that we made as the state and that the people of Georgia accepted when they allowed the lottery. We don't want gambling in our state. We didn't want it many years ago when we voted for it. We don't want it now, I don't think. I personally may not feel that way, but I'm sure that as a body we do. And so we need to decide if we want to maximize the gambling and minimize the education or have it be the other way around. Now, one other important thing. This is simple math with regard to the HB 326. If we do not reform the lottery, this gives the lottery the benefit of the doubt. This says that lottery revenues will grow by 30% over the next 10 years, which is what they did, and that the amount paid into the educational account will grow by 30%. Now, it also assumes, this is Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern's tuition grew 152% over the last 10 years. If it grows 152% over the next 10 years, that's where it will be. And if the lottery grows 30%, that's where the lottery will be. And the cost to the students will be half, and Hope will pay half. That's not the promise that we made. That is not what Hope would look like. Now, that's the best case scenario with no lottery reform. That is the best case scenario. HB 326 does not pay for itself without lottery reform. In fact, as I mentioned, they have continually reduced the percentage. Every single year since the mid-90s, we have reduced the percentage that the Lottery Corporation has paid into the education account. And if that trend continues, in 2020, the lottery revenues will fund less than 22% of the total tuition costs, assuming the same rate of increase in tuition that we had before. That's 10 years. My child is 4. He's going to be 14 in 10 years. We're talking about a whole host of people for whom this plan does not pay for itself unless we have a change in the way that the lottery happens. Generations of people, and they're not far away.